This is Getting Past the Subtitles. I am Sean Peel,
This is DK Lee.
and welcome to the Thailand series. So yeah, this is last week in the Thailand series. Last week we watched Heart Attack, right?
Yes.
Which was my pick. Pretty enjoyable, pretty interesting. It's a movie about young love and the failure of said young love. Definitely go watch that one out. But this week we are going to wrap it up with a interesting film that I enjoyed. This was Lee's pick, called The Last Life in the Universe. And this came out in 2003. It was directed by Penik Ratanaruang. Wow. This series and these names are killing me. But, so yeah, why did you pick this one, Lee? What made you catch your eye? Because you hadn't seen this one either, correct?
Yeah. I think what caught my eye was the stills from the film that I saw and the poster and the name attached to it, Christopher Doyle. I really like his work. And watching this movie, like the cinematography in this film, really quite beautiful. And you can see a lot of deliberation and like specificity in the way that the camera is used and camera positions and stuff like that.
Sure.
That really, I think, helped create the overall mood and style for this film.
No, I agree. It's funny because like that's like I want to dispute you, but like it is pretty like deliberate in cinematography, but to me, like in a way that you're not really supposed to notice that, like the camera work, like when I was watching it, I think cinematography was probably one of the aspects that was really in the back of my mind, because it was really in service of just watching the scenes and the performances take place,
Right.
without having to be like, oh yeah, that's a pretty cool camera move, or the camera, like, it does move in some scenes but hardly moves. To me, it was like the movie was really voyeuristic, and like, I mean, pretty much everything was in a wide, and a lot of times we were like behind objects, like we were like behind a wall or like behind a counter or like maybe in a different room, and we were watching them from a different room. You know what I mean? Like it all
Mm.
kind of supported that sense.
Yeah, surely, like the framing of this film, it's very voyeuristic. The way that the camera moves is very voyeuristic. It's very slow and methodical in the way that it moves. And it gives a sense of just watching the people doing their thing
Right.
and trying to be as quiet as possible. And I think that, like you said, it's part of the hiddenness of the camera. But
Right.
I think if you look for it, then you can really see that it's a deliberate camera moving
Mm.
to evoke this voyeuristic feel.
Yeah. Yeah. That's just like it. I mean, it's, you have to be deliberate to do something like that, but then like it plays kind of like into itself.
Mm.
But overall, like, it is like, no way am I saying that, like, am I kicking that my point. I'm saying that, like, I mean, it really supports the overall theme, and like you said, it really helps create the tone of the film and kind of like the atmosphere of it overall.
Yeah.
So yeah, when you watch this, what was kind of your first impression after the fact?
It's, to be honest, it was a little bit confusing because there's a lot of the narrative is not just linear. There's a lot of different kind of jumping off
Sure.
points. I'm
Sure.
not sure if it's particularly not linear, but it's more like there are different scenes and different shots that juxtapose, and there's these different shots that kind of create a dreamlike feel to it, and that all of that jumbled up creates a sort of confusion for me in understanding really wholly what the movie is about or what
Mm,
the movie is trying to tell us as you
sure.
watch it. So I had a little bit of confusion, but I think it was a good kind of confusion where you're left wondering about what this movie is about and what it's talking about and just
Yeah.
what happens and what their relationship turns out to be, especially near the end, because there's a lot
Right.
of moments where you're not sure if what one of the scenes is the canonical scene or is just like you know the
Like a
main character's
daydream.
thoughts or something like
Yeah.
that. So a lot of that kind of it's a very cool way of using that to not give any conclusions to the story, but allow
Right.
the audience to kind of make their own conclusions about it. Which, like I said before about the movie last week, like I like movies where it lets the audience kind of think and ponder about it and make them wonder and come to conclusions about the movie and the
Sure.
relationships and the outcomes of the main characters and stuff. I think that's, a good way of kind of creating a conversation. So I think that this movie too, I really liked about it.
Yeah, I mean, like on the top of the conclusion, we can get to later, but this movie is interesting that it gives you an answer, but then kind of like reneges it at the end and sort of leaves you to like, well, you can believe that that happens or not. You know what I mean? It kind of gives
Yeah.
you like an already definitive hopefulness, but then kind of leaves it to your decision on like if that is chronologically correct or is it something else entirely. You know.
Hmm.
Um, Overall, I kind of feel the same for you in like near the end. I think some events and some like scenes specifically become a little more like in that realm of unconvolutedness. Like outside of the ending scene, I remember like another scene or two where like it'll happen and it'll cut back to Kenji and then like you kind of get confused or like not even that, but with like even with Noi, like she changes costumes a lot mid
Yeah.
scenes, and you get lost in like did those things chronologically happen or were they like figments of Kenji's like head or even Noi too, where they just like were are we put in Noi's head and then
Yeah.
just like have a different imagery. So like, but those are purposely done, you know. So you are kind of supposed to wonder about it, and the movie never like gives it to you straight as to like what that thematically means. You just kind of have to, you know, it's like all visionary, like it's all visual, and you just have to like piece it together yourself. I think like in terms of the story though and like narrative, for me, I follow along with it and kind of knew. But I do see what you're saying. There's a lot of times where like an action will happen and then we'll return back to the action into like a future scene or like it'll kind of cross between this scene to the next and it can kind of seem confusing then, but to me, like for example, when after the hospital scene and Kenji goes back to work and Inoue shows up with his bag because she's like, hey, you left this bag, and then they go to the elevator, and then like right before they go to the elevator it cuts back to the scene where the car accident happens with Inoue's sister, Need, and then you kind of get like a little more context of like what happened in that scene, but it kind of adds like an emotional weight to Kenji and Noi like sitting in the elevator together. You know what I mean? Kind of like really strengthens like that scene more. But
Yeah.
it tends, but like similar scenes kind of happen throughout as well. And like to that point, there are just like, for me, maybe what I had the most problem with is like, we're as like a viewer, you don't really know like what happens a lot. Like with Kenji and Noi, you don't know a lot about like their life outside of like what's happening in real time. So like a lot of um what's that word? Like expositional stuff kind of happens. Like the whole Yakuza bit, I was like is so random to me because like it's sometimes I'm like, oh, is Kenji like part of the Yakuza, or is his brother Yakuza and he's just like living with him? And then you find out like he's actually a Yakuza, and then like the Yakuza come to like kill him as like a hit kind of thing. So like all that is like confusing to me as well. But that's because like that's like a narrative plot point that we're just never told up front, you know. But that feels like something that we should know. You know what I mean?
I don't know. I mean, the narratively, it wasn't that confusing. It was just the fact that like what's happening between the relationship was a little bit
Mm,
confusing. Is what I'm trying to say. Like understanding exactly what is real life and what is almost like the dream-like scenes, and trying
yeah.
to piece that out and trying to understand like where exactly these two characters are at in terms of their relationship,
Mm,
and
it,
understanding whether or not they're on the same page or not.
sure. Yeah, yeah, I agree. Why don't you just give us the synopsis? Go ahead.
So Kenji is a librarian in the Japan Foundation in Bangkok, and he lives in an apartment where he has like a crap ton of books, and he's very suicidal, and so he always tries to kill himself, but he's always interrupted by something. Like something happens, whether like somebody knocks on the door or like a phone rings, and every time he's about to like
Mm,
commit suicide, things like that happen. And Kenji has a older brother who comes to his house, and his name is Yukio, and he is a yakuza, and he escaped Japan because basically he uh, had sex with the daughter of his employer, and he is running away from him because he's in trouble. And so Yukio's friend Takashi tells him that if I were the employer, I would go and kill him. But Yukio is like, nah, that's never gonna happen, and he's just like chilling in
mm,
Bangkok. Yeah, and Yukio goes to this club, and there are like call girls and stuff like that there. And one of the girls' name is Nid, and she has a sister named Noi. And Noi is mad at Nid because Nid slept with Noi's boyfriend John. And
mm,
one day, he's like organizing the books, and he encounters Nid like looking at the books, and he like it's just like a scene there.
yeah.
It's nothing really happens, but it's kind of a scene where he sees Nid and is kind of
Right.
like looking at her, and Yukio Yukio basically always like brings presents and stuff into Kenji's house. And one day Kenji is like looking through and he sees a teddy bear, and he looks inside the teddy bear and sees a pistol. And while Yukio is in Kenji's house, he brings his friend Takashi, but Takashi is also employed by Yukio's former employer and is has a hit on Yukio because of what he did to the daughter. And so basically Takashi kills Yukio, and Kenji starts hearing the gunshots, and he goes out to the living room and sees that Yukio is killed by Takashi.
Mm,
And at that moment, Kenji, with the gun that he found in the teddy bear, he kills Yukio's friend Takashi. And there's two dead bodies now in the house. And basically, he cleans it up and he hides them in the house. After that, uh, Kenji is like walking near a bridge and he's about to kill himself. And that's when Noi and Nid are like driving past, and they're having an argument because of what happened with John, and how Nid basically slept with John, and Noi is mad about it. And
yeah.
Noi tells Nid to get out of the car and just walk. And while Nid is walking, she sees Kenji about to jump off the bridge, and she's looking at him. And while she's distracted, a car hits Nid, and she dies from getting hit by the car. And after that, because Kenji and Noi, they both lost siblings, they kind of have this weird relationship where Noi goes and talks to Kenji and tells him, you left your belongings at the hospital, because they both went together to the hospital because
Mm.
he was there at the scene, and he was kind of at fault because she was looking at him, I guess. And so uh Noi brings back Kenji's stuff, and at that moment, they kind of start to build a relationship. Like they go out and eat dinner and stuff. And because of the corpse in Kenji's house, he doesn't want to go back to his own house. And weirdly enough, he's like, "Hey, can I go chill at your house?" And Noi is just like, "Okay, yeah, come." And so
No
like
big deal.
he starts like hanging out in her house and never wants to go back to his house, so she lets him stay longer and longer.
Mm.
And Noi's house is like a big mess, so Kenji decides to like clean the house and wash dishes and stuff like that.
Super OCD.
Yeah, and as like the film progresses, like their relationship becomes more and more, they become friends and they kind of get closer and closer, but
Mm.
there's always this weird almost dreamlike or almost like magic like moments where like the house like cleans itself, or like Noi turns into like she's like wearing different clothes all of a
Right.
sudden, and it like it's all to kind of portray a different kind of angle to their relationship and understanding what their relationship is like. And so they start to have this really weird, like almost romantic, but kind of just like friendship like relationship.
Sure.
And while that's going on, John, Noi's, boyfriend, quote unquote boyfriend, he keeps calling, and Noi gets angry at him because she doesn't want to talk to him. And she decides that she wants to leave Bangkok and go to Japan, as she was like studying, learning Japanese and stuff like that. And she wants to leave Japan.
Yeah.
And while that's happening, one day John comes into Noi's house and begins to beat her up. And Kenji basically drives him away. And after that, Noi decides to go to Japan, and Kenji drives Noi to the airport, and she leaves, and Kenji comes back home, and he decides that he wants to go to Japan as well. So he's about to go to Japan. But like as he's about to leave the house, he has this huge diarrhea and he has to go to the bathroom. He goes to the bathroom. And while he's in the bathroom, John comes into his house trying to kill him. But since he's in the bathroom, he doesn't they cross paths. And
Yeah.
while John's like looking around the house, these Yakuza from Japan who's trying to figure out what happened to Takeshi come and trying to kill Kenji as well. And so John and the Yakuza, they fight, and John basically dies at that place. And the Yakuza are like looking around the house, and they hear the toilet drain going down, and they go into the bathroom and find that the window is broken, and basically Kenji escaped through the window. And at the end, the last scenes, we see Kenji arrested for some reason. And we also see Noi in Japan, where she's working at a restaurant. And at the end, there's this moment where Noi is staying at this house, and one of the women there tells Noi that somebody's looking for her. And we see Noi like going out with a happy face. And I guess supposedly, I guess that's Kenji coming back, and them reuniting. So that's how
But
basically the movie basically ends.
right.
And like the thing that you talked about with the book, The Last Lizard, is a book that Kenji talks about. It's a children's book about this reptile who realizes that he's the last one alive. And he talks about how like the lizard realizes that, being with somebody, even if it's your enemies, is better than being alone. And that's kind of the theme of the movie.
Yeah, not bad. Pretty good. Pretty good. Um, Yeah, and it's kind of funny that like the book sort of represents a like the whole kind of like theme of the film
Mm-hmm.
of the film, or like it wants to, but like it's ironic that Kenji himself like doesn't want to live anymore, right? Because he's pretty suicidal,
Yeah.
and he kind of explains in the beginning that it isn't, that the reason why isn't because he's like suffering from anything, but
Mm-hmm.
more just doesn't have a desire to live, or just to go through like kind of like a day to day thing.
Yeah.
But then kind of like learns, but kind of like, gets reinvigorated to like live again, or like enjoy the day to day lives of aspects when he meets Noi, and they kind of have like that relationship.
Yeah.
So it's funny that like he's kind of like attracted to that book in the beginning, and then kind of like learns from it after the fact. Because I mean, he's not like totally alone from the start. Like he has his brother who doesn't really care about. I guess that you can consider him his enemy
Yeah.
in that sense. So,
I mean, even
um,
even at the beach, he talks about when Noi asks, like, "Do you miss your brother?" And he's like, "No, not really."
nah, not really. That conversation, that scene itself is just like weird. like when they start talking, it's like, "Do you miss your sister?" Like, yo, that happened like not that long ago.
Yeah.
Like the way they talked in that scene is like,
So nonchalant.
yeah, so casual. It's a little disassociative a bit. Um, yeah. Any moment like particular that really attracted you?
I thought that moment that I really enjoyed was when Noi and Kenji are sleeping together on the sofa and they fall asleep and Kenji wakes up and I think he had a wet dream or something like that, right?
He jizzed his pants.
And yeah, basically he jizzed his pants and he's like cleaning his pants. But later on, we also see it's almost like a dreamlike moment where, like you, what he talked about, where Noi like keeps changing clothes and stuff. But it's
Right.
also where like Noi, I think, takes a bath and comes out and tells Kenji to take a bath as well because he smells.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at that moment, a little while after that, it goes back to them sleeping on the sofa. And so what I was wondering, or what I thought, was that it was Kenji's dream, and that's why he had the wet dream because of that. And well, that's my
So
interpretation of it.
yeah. Oh, so they went back to the couch after that scene? I thought
Yeah,
they didn't.
because there's that moment when they're on the couch and
Yeah.
Noi turns into like Nid, or like she's
Right.
wearing Nid's clothes,
Right. Right.
and then later on, like there's that moment, it comes back to that sofa moment, and the dream sequence had happened right before it, and they come back to the sofa moment. And so I'm wondering whether or not if that was
Oh, are you
Kenji's
are you talking
dreams
about
about it.
like the shot for shot thing? Like it like goes to the shot of them. Like it doesn't like play out the scene, but it's like it's like a
Yeah,
little
it goes back
montage
to
of the
that
shot.
shot. Yeah, it goes
Yeah.
back to
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
shot of them on the
Of them.
sofa.
Right. But then like she's not in costume during that. It's kind of like what
Yeah,
really
she's not.
happened kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm wondering if that's
Oh.
like what happened. That's the dream
Right.
sequence that
Right.
happened in his dream while he was having the wet dream about.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's interesting. Actually, I didn't even think of that. That could be true. Yeah, it could be interesting. It's funny because it's so displaced that it like just the sequence that it happens. It is like it's so canon.
Mhm.
It feels like, to me it just like felt like I really couldn't tell you like how I could have interpreted Noi like basically turning into Nid for
Yeah.
like a third of the movie.
Right.
Because that's the first thing that happens, right? So like they're both on the couch and she's like watching the movie, and then she like beckons him over, and
Mhm.
then basically she like falls asleep on his lap, and then like when she's up sitting up, she's in regular costume, and then when she lays on his lap and then we cut too closer to them, we see that she's like in her like uniform for when she was like a
Yeah.
caller at the place, which is basically like a schoolgirl uniform. And then even after that scene, so after like he jizzes his pants, and then she's like, Noi is burning all of her sister's clothes
Yeah.
outside. She's still in
Wearing the
Mid's
clothes.
costume.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like, that's when I really was like a little confused to like, so is this interpretational or is this canon, you know?
Right.
And then when is the moment that like she kind of turns back? I kind of forget. Or is it
It just cuts
just
to a different scene and then it comes back later.
probably?
Yeah, she
But
comes
yeah,
back later.
just like the way that it happens just feels like off. And then I don't know who to like if it is like something to interpret, like who is kind of like imagining it, because like sometimes it's you see that like Kenji kind of imagines things or like daydreams about stuff, and
Yeah.
you recognize that like, okay, I'm in his head. But the same thing happens with like Noi, but
Yeah.
in that context it's like I don't know whose mind I'm in exactly.
Right.
You know what I
Especially
mean?
like when the house starts cleaning itself.
Mm-hmm.
That I feel like is in Noi's mind, right?
100%.
Like as
Yeah,
she's
yeah.
walking through the house,
Right,
like
right.
the house starts becoming cleaner and stuff. So I'm thinking that's Noi. And also
Yeah.
because, she always smokes and she's always like doing weed and stuff.
Right.
So you
So
you have
that's
a
what,
sense
yeah,
that
that
she's the
it's
one that's
because she's
hallucinating
high.
and stuff. Yeah.
Right. So that's why I was like, I mean, that scene like was like pretty on the nose where I mean she's smoking like right before, and I'm like, okay, she's high, and this is kind of like a dream sequence in a way, and then it kind of falls back into like she's reminiscing about her sister, you know, and then that's why she grabs like the picture frame and sitting there,
Yeah.
and then like I mean, she's always smoking, and then like even before when she changes costumes, like she's smoking in that scene, so it
Mhm.
kind of like leans towards like it's Noi, but Noi's like sleeping in that scene, you know, so it's like it's a little hard to kind of you know to like see or decide what's going on there.
Yeah.
But overall, like interesting nonetheless. Like I'm not saying that it's a bad thing towards the film,
Hmm.
but an interesting choice that you know, like it's definitely up for interpretation each and every way. But it's I don't know. It's like it's a question. It's
Yeah.
like
I
a
mean, I
question.
really enjoyed how the film was edited
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it really made it more engaging. I feel like if it was just straightforward, there's
Mm,
not really much there narratively for it to really pull the weight. But I think the editing
right.
and the mood and the style and the dreamlike elements of the film really made it intriguing.
Yeah.
And the
It's
music
definitely
too.
yeah, I agree. It's definitely all those things are the backbone of the film, 100%.
Hmm.
I really like the soundtrack actually. I it's
Same,
it's super subtle, but
same.
like is there to invoke like what you're watching at a certain time.
Yeah, like I like that moment. We talked about it in the elevator area where
Mm,
she comes to give him the his bag and stuff.
yeah.
That moment, they're just sitting there and he's standing there, she's sitting, and the music kicks in for a good maybe like 10, 15 seconds, and it really
Right.
gives you that environmental ambience that really grounds it in that world, and it really makes you feel a certain kind of way for them.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
it has that sadness in the music, but also this kind of weird longing and all of that mixed in
Right.
to the music that makes you kind of attached
It
to that
it
that scene.
it's super moody for sure.
Yeah.
No, I think and what do you think of like leaning towards like technicality, like the mixing overall in the movie? Cuz I mean, it like the music in some areas like really came through and
Hmm.
like overpowered the dialogue in like a lot of scenes I noticed, and like sometimes it was hard for me to like listen into what even the characters were saying themselves
Hmm.
because of like the soundtrack that was going on, you know.
Yeah.
And so it was an interesting choice for the filmmakers to like recede what they're talking about and kind of like throw in music
Yeah.
more rather than like you know because like this movie has it too, where there's some sequences where it's like a montage s kind of thing, and then there's like music over the actions, and there's not really dialogue happening, and it's just there to kind of like move from like shot to shot, and like it's a montage. But then here, there's a lot of scenes where they are talking, but like the music still like really floods it. Like when they're
Yeah.
driving like near the end to the airport, like the music comes through so loud, and then there's
Yeah.
like these voiceover dialogues between them. They're like super like light and like sounds very so like really distanced too.
I liked it. I think it adds to the overall ambience of it and the
Right, right.
style and the mood of it, because those dialogue, it's not necessarily meant to be important per se.
Sure.
Like it's not the focal point, but it's all of that added together that makes that moment, right? And
Right.
those added dialogue is more like the sprinkles on top of the cupcake kind of.
Sure.
And another moment that I really thought was interesting was when she puts on that tape of the Japanese
Yeah,
learning. You're
yeah.
learning the Japanese,
For like
that tape
Thai.
cassette,
Yeah.
and it
It was
goes
like there
through.
forever.
Yeah, I was there for a long, long time. Like even when Kenji is like about to do the dishes and stuff like that, all
Yeah.
of that, he's like constantly there, and that through line is there. And I thought that was really interesting.
Mm.
I don't know exactly what to make of it, but I think it's really, I don't know, it's really well placed. And a lot of the different like musical and audio
Yeah.
like parts of the film, I really thought was very well done. It provokes a certain kind of imagery and a certain kind of mood
Yeah.
that is very attractive for some reason.
Mm. I mean, I think if there's one thing that we can agree on is that like as quote unquote like boring or like as like narratively empty the movie is, like it is consistent through like the tone and the mood
Mm,
that and the atmosphere that you're watching it all the time. And like it's not just like it's not one aspect alone that is able to do that. It's kind of like the collection of a lot of things in the movie that help maintain that consistent tone throughout.
mm,
And I think that like in that scene when she puts on the tape and then like literally for that entire scene, even after she's gone, like Kenji's alone, like you said, like you still hear like the translations and like that record tape still happening in the background. To me, like it is like a filler where like, oh yeah, we don't need music in this scene to like, invoke the mood, but
mm.
instead we just have this tape that like constantly plays throughout. That
Yeah,
kind
that's
of
like
keeps
connecting all the scenes together.
right, right. It keeps it like connected, like you said, like really seams it through. And like somehow weirdly grounded, like, in that kind of world.
Yeah.
And then like I mean, it kind of like has a little tie-in at the end because remember like at the end of that scene, like the last translation is like "welcome home" or something like that. It's like the Japanese phrase to like "I am home" or like "welcome home," and then like the Thai translation, and
Hmm.
then like it cuts to like a whole separate, um, a whole separate scene entirely.
Yeah.
So it kind of does it smartly and with the sense of a purpose too. Like it isn't there to just be there. You know what I mean? I think for me, my scene is probably like the little segment when so like they're starting to get closer, Kenji and Noi, and Noi invites him to like go out, and then they end up going to like some outside like arcade slash bar.
Yeah.
And it's basically like them kind of having a good time. I
Hmm.
really like that scene just because it's different from what we saw up to that point. It's like a change of setting finally,
Right.
and just like an interesting setting too. Like nowhere have I seen like a Dance Revolution like station like in an outside tent. Like it's like an outdoor like boys and girls club kind of
Hmm.
thing. And then it goes to like them drinking at the bar, and then like another old man is trying to speak Japanese to Kenji.
Yeah.
And so it's just like that whole like scene and the vibe to it was really nice to see. It was like a
Mm.
nice change of pace and a much more uplifting tone than what we've seen the entire way through.
Yeah. I really like the ending shot of when Noi is sitting in the airport I thought it was a nice touch when you see the screen next to her, and the ending credits are rolling on the screen. I thought that was a little nice touch.
There's so many like things in this movie that are like ironic
Mm.
or just like so silly. There's that did you catch the Itchy the Killer poster when
Yeah, yeah,
he
yeah,
was in the library? Which is the actor Kenji Asano.
yeah.
Tadonobu Asano. I think that was his last role before that movie because he was in Itchy the
Mm.
Killer. And there's a cameo by Takashi Miike. He's the Yakuza boss that flies
Yeah.
down. So it was like, ah. It was very much like, that's such a consistent thing in this series. Like with Ombak, where they have Steven
The
Spielberg and
cameos,
like like they're
the little
throwing in
Easter
these,
eggs.
and then they end up getting the support by those filmmakers. So I think that I'm gonna take notes on that. Like if you really want them, call them out on your movie, get their attention. Yeah, I mean, anything else to add? Anything? Trying to think.
What did you think happened at the end? Do you think that she met him?
I would like to.
Or do you think that it's also another almost dreamlike sequence?
Right.
Because we see Kenji arrested,
Yeah.
and also we see Noi in the house.
Well, like I mean, you know for a fact that Noi goes to Japan because you know, like in that timeline per se, like we know that she's at the airport and she's about to leave. So
Mhm.
skipping forward in time, like okay, obviously she's in Osaka. So
Yeah.
like in that sense, I believe it. But like the question is like, does
She meet him.
Kenji? You're right. Does Kenji even like leave Thailand? Like,
Mhm.
does he actually get out of prison or wherever he ends up, or does he go free? You know, like that's
Yeah.
not
Like
concrete
my
per se.
interpretation was like a lot of time passed. Like Noi,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
of the
yeah.
haircut, it makes me think that a lot of time passed.
She could be
And
like
maybe
30.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe he was arrested. He even went to jail for some time, and
Mhm.
then finally he came back to see her. That's my
Right.
interpretation of it.
But yeah, I mean, like the very last shot with we cut back to him in the interrogation room. Like, even if you like read into him, like he's looking up, like he's daydreaming. Like, you know, it
Yeah,
perfectly invokes that it is all in his head. You know, or like it's a wishful thinking on his behalf, and
yeah.
not that it's an actual event in the future. You
So
know?
if you think about it that way, maybe it never happened. It was just what he hoped.
Right.
But what did you think about the fact that, you know, in the middle of the film when he's about to, you know, he takes a whiff of the smoke,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
he's like, oh, he can't smoke it. But at the end of the film, he's like perfectly fine at smoking it.
See, you know what? That's when I was like there, and I was like, was it all a lie?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
you
Because
get
he
that
is a
sense,
yakuza too. You know that, right?
right? Yeah.
Because you know when he comes out of the bath, you see his back, and he's all
Hmm.
tattooed up as well. So it
Yeah.
implies that he was part of the yakuza as well.
Right.
And
Which, like, that's something that I kind of knew from the beginning
yeah,
because I was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh, yeah, I'm sure that he's also yakuza. Just like,
But it's
you know, just doesn't.
confirmed when you see that moment.
Right, right, right. But yeah, like he starts smoking and then he smokes regularly, and then you're just like, huh,
Hmm.
like, because like even like before that, there were some scenes where, like, especially again when it kind of cuts to like Noi keeps switching costumes with Nid, and it's like is kind of like everything that we're watching is that Kenji's mind, you know, like
Right.
did he like wander somewhere on his own and then like found a house or something? Like is like all this like you know what I mean? It kind of like and then the ending that scene just kind of like nudges it towards that point. Like, hey, yeah, it could all be kind of fake, you know?
No, I mean I think they are real people. It's
Yeah.
not all in his mind,
He's a
but
psychopath, bro.
definitely some of the things make you wonder whether or not
Yeah.
it is actually real or just in
Mhm.
his mind.
I mean, like this is all purposeful. Like this is all like what the film wants you to kind of discuss and have a talk about. Like there
Yeah.
is a huge level of surrealism throughout the film. You know.
And I'm sure like when they pan through the different items that are on the table
Right.
at the end, like the knife is there and all the different items that are there. Like
I was like, how
I
did he have
wonder
those in
I
his
wonder if
pockets?
there's a clue there that tells
Uh,
us whether or not it's real or not. But I just haven't gone to that yet, up to that
I,
point
I
yet. But
I like made a mental note to look through, like go back and like see it again to like notice something because I didn't know if like I think the biggest takeaway would be like if the ashtray was in his like if he had the
the
portable
pendant,
ashtray,
yeah.
like yeah, it would have all been fake, you know.
Mm.
But probably not. But where do you get two guns from? Is my question. Like he got the one from the
Probably,
bear, but where do you get the
yeah.
other one from?
Oh, that's true. I don't know.
Like the black one, because I was like,
You don't know. Wait, no. He got it from the other guy who killed his brother.
oh,
He
okay.
got the teddy bear gun, and
And
then
then
the guy
Tanaka's
who
gun,
killed his brother had another gun. So
right,
those are two
right,
guns.
okay. But yeah, that's a mental note to go back and see. But if the table is clean, then it's all good in the hood. You know what I mean? It's all it's all real. Yeah, but I also did like the just like I mean the movie is full of like little scenes, you know. And I really like the way that like the objects are kind of portrayed or that they have like a payoff to them. Like, you know, with that ending scene, his gray bag, and then she notices the gray bag, and it's like, oh, you know, that's him. Or
Yeah,
like kind of like a callback to going to the future, and then she still has the portable ashtray, and it's
yeah.
like just like these different like mementos that kind of always kind of reoccur and have a bit of significance. And like again, like back to the costume, that's kind of like a big one as well.
Yeah, those are
All, the,
nice little points, little moments.
all these little tidbits. It's a movie that's just strangely tranquil.
Yeah.
Like, like it's funny that it's contrasting in that sense where the characters and the plot is like untranquil
Mm-hmm.
and like the circumstances that they go through, but the mood of it is like really calming in a
Yeah.
strange way. And it also with like Kenji, who's like OCD and like super calm about everything as well.
Right.
But let's talk about their relationship. What is what are some points you have about Kenji and Noi?
They really have a weird relationship for sure. But I think the dynamic between them was pretty interesting and kind of
Mm,
intriguing. Just seeing how he's very methodical and kind of very OCD about everything, and she's very, I don't care about anything and just whatever about everything.
right.
And having those two come together and come together in a way where they can be mutual friends
Mm,
and come to understand each other a little bit through the loss that they have, and also
right.
just coming together to want something from each other, I guess,
Sure.
maybe implicitly. I thought that it was interesting and that the dynamic was very well done.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like the reason that they are together or like they're constantly together is simply that they don't want to be alone in a way, right?
Hmm.
I mean, especially for Noi who just lost her sister, so she's kind of like pushing and pulls Kenji throughout the film, before
Yeah,
she gradually kind of lets him in and they kind of grow closer in that sense. And then in Kenji's like, he's suicidal by nature, but he also doesn't want to be alone or wants to like be close with Noi because I mean she's like the only quote unquote friend that he has or like
hmm,
somebody that's not like his brother's kind of an asshole and in that sense like
yeah,
not a negative aspect in his life per se. But no, I think it's super interesting that characteristically wise they're polar opposites. Like I said, he's like super OCD. He's like super OCD about everything. The way that I see it is like he's a really confined person, and then Noi's a really open person. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like she has like this crazy amount of freedom about her, and that by the end of the movie, they I want to say that they wanted something from each other, but they ended up taking a piece of like each other into themselves. You know, where Kenji like wants to be more free, and he ends up like that's why he like wants to go to Osaka, where he finally decides to go back home. Obviously, he wants to go with her, and then Noi kind of like becomes a little more refined at the end, instead of being like she's kind of like a hot-headed child in a little bit of a way, like really irresponsible, but she becomes more responsible by the end. And like she even wears like the suit, like the before she leaves to Japan and everything. So
And
that kind of really
even get like her giving him the car, I think is kind of symbolic of that, and him kind of opening up a little bit, because like her car is like an open roof car too,
yeah, yeah.
and the car is kind of symbolic of freedom in
Mm,
that sense, because she uses it to drive around everywhere, and they go to the beach together with the car and all of that. And she finally, she gives him the car and says, you drive it, like it's yours now. And
right.
I think that's kind of symbolic of that, of her saying like, hey, you can be, you take it and you go wherever you want. You can be free as well, kind of
Mm,
free of the burden of like the dread and the kind of not
right.
wanting to live kind of thing, and
Mm,
finding a new meaning in life.
yeah. Yeah, I mean they also both kind of, develop a little bit of like a codependency to them. I think that's where like the romance kind of aspects really start to fill in. I mean, by the end, she's gonna go to Japan with or without him,
Mm-hmm.
but he kind of wants to chase after her. And then all that's kind of like supported at the very end, where she's like really excited to see him again once he like visits her apartment in Osaka or wherever. If that's
Yeah.
real or not, if any of that actually happens. Hey, listeners, if you've tuned into more than one episode, you probably know that me and Lee are quite passionate about Asian movies. We actually got to start because we think that movies are meant to be discussed, and there are so many Asian movies out there to be discussed and to be discovered. Honestly, that goes for just about any international film, if you ask me. I've actually had an interest in podcasting before we launched one and decided to share our discussions and just launch a podcast of our own. Producing this show couldn't have been easier with Anchor. It's a true one-stop shop for literally everything podcasting. Even if you don't have the tech, Anchor is equipped with in-app recording, a music library, editing some segments, cover art. There's just so much flexibility to do. Even better, they help you distribute your podcast to popular platforms, which is why you guys can listen to us via Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you guys are listening. To ice the cake, they even help you monetize your podcast by matching you up with sponsors. You gotta trust me, they literally take care of just about everything. So if you're on the fence, just jump. There's no excuse. Go to anchor.fm or download their app. It's all free to get started today. The last point I want to make is I really like movies like this in the sense that they're like cross country, cross foreign films, right? So this is a Thailand production film with a Thai director, but with like lots of Japanese actors and basically more Japanese than even Thai, I would say. Probably like 60-40 maybe. And I also find it interesting that like it's always English that it becomes the default language between two people,
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you can't speak Thai and I can't speak Japanese, but we can both speak English. That's always interesting to see. But yeah, I really like movies that have this aspect that kind of cross between, because it feels like new in a way, and it's always like
Mm.
refreshing. But there's like so much that you can like do with that, like taking two foreign people and exploring like just a movie or exploring like a relationship between them. It always, what I found is that it always falls back into like it becomes like a story or like explores themes of like human nature, like it
Yeah.
doesn't Like it never falls. If you're watching a Korean film or Japanese film or American film or whatever, like that's specifically that. Like we talk about, we see a display of like how they handle relationships and like the social interactions between them, and that my interest in foreign films is like watching how like that culture and how they socially play out in a movie. But here it's like a double negative in the sense that you can't really do that because now you have like someone who's Thai and someone who's Japanese, and so it kind of falls down into like just two people trying to connect with each other,
Yeah.
and like a central theme of this movie at the end of the day is like humans want to connect with other humans. You know what I mean? Like despite having different languages or coming from different backgrounds or anything like that, there's always like a common ground and unique and different odd relationships that even can happen out of that. So it's like there's just so much room to do with like doing it this way. So it's always like a type of movie that I'm always looking for. We're gonna do a series on it one day, Lee. Like I said, maybe not that for the next one, but I'll find a few.
What is our next one?
What is our next series? Well, more convolutedness with time. Yep. We're going to do some time travel stuff. So, joke's on you, Lee. Going to get you more confused. Yeah, it's going to be on the theme of time travel. So, anything in that regard. The ones that I picked are both. No, I take that back. One is like a time travel romance, and the other one's time travel dramedy, I guess, but more comedy than drama. And then yours, you've never even seen before, because neither have I, right?
Yeah.
So they are The Girl Who Leapt Through Time. It's a Japanese film. What year did that come out in? Yeah, no, 2010. Girl Who Leapt Through Time. We're not doing the original anime. We're actually going to do the live action one. So go ahead and hate on us if you want. But it's actually kind of good if memory serves me right. And I hope it does. We're also doing Heaven Soldier and Ditto. Both are Korean, South Korean.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then the last one is My Tomorrow Your Yesterday, which is also Japanese. I think that one's 16 or maybe 15.
I think it's 2016.
Per 2016. And that is the romance time travel one.
Yeah.
Which I've seen both of mine. I've only seen them once and it's been like a while, so I really don't like remember much. I remember like My Tomorrow Yesterday being like not amazing, but like good enough. But it is a little convoluted if I remember of like how the time travel mechanics work. I remember like the only thing I remember is like a specific scene where they're like drawing like because they're in school and she's like drawing like on the chalkboard like how it works, and then like me sitting on my screen like what like yeah, I don't get it.
Yeah, I watched it too. I thought it was pretty good. But nothing crazy, but yeah.
Yeah, like good enough. Like I said, it's nothing crazy, but fine. And then Heaven Soldier and Ditto. Haven't seen it before. Should be interesting. They're both older because Lee picked them. So don't expect anything before 2000 or after 2010 from him. But yeah, so we're gonna start with The Girl Who Leapt Through Time next week, and we'll see you there.
Bye.